I might pass you over to Dan for the double yellow line comment.
So, when the scheme was submitted, there were no double yellow lines on this stretch by the virtual footway. So they are quite a new element that's been put down, and that sort of supersedes some of the comments that were made. But my assessment at the time was that there was probably no impact on visibility down towards the direction you're talking, to the left of those photos, and that the access would be appropriate with the parking retained as it is now on the ground. So yeah, I don't see a highway safety concern with the parking retained as it is.
So one further question is that when we open up the parking access, do the cars just drive over the pedestrian way? There's no change to the pedestrian markings on the road or anything?
Yeah, exactly. The virtual footway arrangement would not change at all from as it's existing is.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Monroy?
Oh, okay, that's better. Well, just about the road, actually. So rather than this particular planning application, just to make this clearer, could you explain why this virtual footway only goes to that point? It's probably something to do with availability on the other side, but I can't see. And I just wanted to make the point. I don't know Peasdown very well, but I have visited various places, and that whole area to the west, I suppose it is, of Braesdown Lane. There are a lot of residential areas there that you can, and Braesdown Lane is one of the key ways to access them. So even though it looks like it's a quiet lane, I would be interested to know the data of traffic going along there, because I would think it could be quite busy actually for access purposes. But that's just so two things really about the virtual footpath and then, data. Thank you.
Yeah, in terms of the virtual footway, again, I wasn't involved in the design of that. Colleagues were, but you're right that it would only go as far as there being opportunities on the other side of the road. So it would be expected that pedestrians would then cross at that point and use the footway on the other side of the road. In terms of traffic, I think I'll just repeat my earlier comments. When I went, it was quite quiet in the middle of the day. But again, given the number of residential properties around that area, you would expect it to be fairly busy at commuting times, yes.
You're okay. Right, we just want to make a clarification. So over to Sarah James.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to respond to the point regarding the data. This is an application for a single dwelling. The information to accompany the application obviously has to be something that's proportionate and required in order to make your decision. In this case, it is a single dwelling. The additional traffic can only be very limited, and the case officer, the highway officer has obviously visited the site, knows the site well, and has made an assessment on the highway safety impacts. It is extremely unlikely, even if we had the data, that would make any difference whatsoever to that assessment. And I'm sure that's what the highway officer would be able to clarify to you regarding that point. So, like I said, it has to be proportionate. If we were talking about a much larger development, then traffic data might be something that would be reasonable to expect. But we can certainly make an assessment in this case.
Any more questions? Okay. Right, we'll now move to the debate. Just to say that there's been discussion in the past about whether it's better to have a motion put forward quickly or whether to wait to hear what people are thinking before putting forward a motion. I'm perfectly content with either approach. It's entirely up to you. If a motion is put forward and it's not supported, then obviously there would be something put in its place. It's just important that we come to a decision. So, who would like to start the debate? Okay, Councillor Halsall.
Thank you, Chair. So it's within the village of Peasdown, so the principle of development for a dwelling is obviously clearly acceptable. Happy with the officers looking into the highway issues. It is only one dwelling, so therefore any impact in terms of safety along that road is going to be negligible. The actual design of the house, certainly the front elevation is fine. It will fit in with the character of the houses on Braesdown Lane, especially on the same side. My concern is simply about the siting of the building. I wonder why there's such a gap between the existing row of houses and the new dwelling. There are a cluster of buildings, of course, at the rear of all those cottages. So this particular house does seem to be a little bit outside that cluster. So it's going to be looking a little bit... It's going to stand alone, isn't it? It's not going to fit in, I don't necessarily think, with the urban grain. Yes, it's on the same building line, but I'm just concerned about the large gap and wondered why the house isn't next to the existing cottages and why the parking couldn't be, given there's a new access going in, why the parking can't be on the north side of the houses. The fact that on the rear elevation there's only that one window at ground floor level, and obviously the reason for that is because it's to prevent overlooking on the neighbour's garden. If the house was further south, then obviously I don't think the rear elevation would need to look so contrived, because obviously you have all the other buildings, like the existing garages, where overlooking wouldn't be such an issue. So I think the siting is the problem for me, and perhaps the design on the rear. Thank you.
Sorry, but Councillor Warren next.
Yeah, thank you. Trying to look at this dispassionately, which I think is probably our job here on the Planning Committee. We need houses in the area. That's the first thing. We need houses in every area. It's material consideration. You're reading this from our planning officers, our expert planning officers, I must say. It's consideration was given to the National Planning Policy Framework. It's within the housing development boundary. They've ticked all the boxes, especially with highways. There's been, I know, one or two concerns with highways, but I think the reality is it's one house amongst a cluster of other houses. And I think it's actually very difficult to refuse this application and go against the officer's recommendation when you look at it as an overall. So I actually would be happy to move that we accept the officer's recommendation and move that forward with a proposal.
Right, thank you, Councillor Warren. That was a motion to accept the officer's recommendation to permit. Is there a seconder? Councillor Simon, just to be clear, you're seconding. Yeah, thank you. Okay, that's our motion for debate. Recommendation to approve. Who would like to speak? Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. I'll be honest, I still have concerns about this application. One of my main concerns is that we're setting an unhealthy precedent here for that row of houses to develop an entire row of properties that we haven't planned for and would not be easy to accommodate within this location. I also have concerns about the access points and in this particular road. The majority of properties along this road are set back from the roads. They're predominantly laid to lawn at the front with traditional brick walls, and they don't have vehicle access points for good reason, because the road really can't accommodate it. So I still have very much concerns about this.
Thank you. Could I just clarify something with the legal officer? The point about setting precedent. We look at every planning application individually. Is setting a precedent for something that may happen in the future, is that a material consideration, or is it something we should disregard?
Yes, it's capable of being a material consideration, but it would depend on the circumstances of the case.
What about the circumstances of this case?
Thank you, Chair. The addition of a house here would clearly change the context of the area. So in any future applications, the fact that a house was constructed would change the goalposts to some extent. So precedent, as the legal officer said, is capable of being a material consideration, and it would change the circumstances, but nonetheless it would not be automatically the case that that would lead to other houses, because each site and application would be considered on its own specific merits. Now, I would suggest, looking at the site plan, that there are no directly comparable sites. This is the only one which fronts onto the road here. There are obviously other long gardens like this one, but they have different circumstances, not having a direct relationship with the road. But hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you. Councillor Hodge.
I am in agreement with some of the points made by Councillor Hounsell and my colleague to the left, and I would like to request a site visit. I don't feel I can come to a conclusion on any of those points without a site visit.
Right. Well, we've got a motion that's been put forward and seconded, and that's what's being debated at the moment. Should that fail, then you can put forward a motion for a site visit, but that will have to depend on what happens with this, this debate. Councillor Simon.
I think I should briefly explain why I seconded Councillor Warren's proposal, which is broadly the same thinking as he has, that I don't, while I accept the point that Councillor Hounsell makes, that we've widened the gap by moving it towards the existing row of houses from which it's the garden. I don't think that's going to be such a disadvantage, and I think that the officer has made a well-argued case for this house in this location.
Thank you. And of course, we can be reminded of the point that we're not here to replace one application with another. We look at what's in front of us. Anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I would just firstly point out that obviously this development isn't using the existing access. As pointed out by Councillor Hounsell, it's putting a new access in alongside the existing access. That existing access does access the row of the rear of all those cottages. So listening to the explanation from our legal team, there is a potential precedent here for building more properties along that existing access point. So I think those concerns are very valid. I would certainly support, if this fails, I'll certainly support a site visit.
Anybody else want to speak? If nobody else does, we'll move to a vote on the motion to accept the officer recommendation to permit. So anybody else want to speak? Okay, we have a proposal, a motion to accept the officer recommendation to permit, made by Councillor Warren, seconded by Councillor Simon. Could all those in favour please show? All those against, please show. Any abstentions? Right, so the motion is carried and the decision is to accept the officer recommendation to permit. Thank you. Right, we'll take a 5-minute break. Right. Councillor Hughes, I think we're ready to begin again. Thank you. Okay, we're resuming now, and we're moving on to the second application that we are considering. This is 23/00419/LBA 1 Cambridge Place, Widcombe Hill, Widcombe. So over to the case officer to present her report.
Thank you, Chair. So item 2 relates to an application for listed building consent for the installation of solar panels at 1 Cambridge Place. The property is Grade 2 listed and is sited within Widcombe. The site also lies within the City of Bath World Heritage Site and Conservation Area. So this is a site location plan with the site edged in red and indicated with the red star on the aerial image to the right. The site sits adjacent to the Grade 2 listed St Matthew's Church. So jumping straight into a proposed roof plan, I don't have an existing one to show. So you can see the valley roof, the inside valley here. There are existing solar panels on this roof, and those are proposed to be replaced. And in addition, 4 solar panels are proposed to the front principal elevation roof slope. So this is the proposed front elevation. The roof is not shown on this plan and is said not to be visible. And on the right is the side elevation, which shows the cabling which would run down the side of the property. Again, the roof pictures aren't shown and are said not to be visible. This is a photo stood at ground level, directly in front of the site. As you will see, the parapet on the top of the roof does obscure the front of the roof from this angle. As we move up the hill, this is the property here and here next to the church. The roof slope where the solar panels are proposed is visible from this viewpoint. And this is from the other side. Here you can't see where the solar panels would be behind the parapet further down the hill. Officer recommendation is to refuse the application for the reasons stated within the committee report.
Thank you. We have one speaker, and it's Councillor Deborah Collins, Ward Councillor.
Is that working? Is this working? Yes. Okay. Thank you, Chair. I've been asked to make this statement on behalf of Mr Chris Bourne, who is not available to attend the Planning Committee until 2 o'clock this afternoon. 1 Cambridge Place is a semi-detached villa-style property that was built in 1825 and is situated towards the lower end of Widcombe Hill. It has some large, high-ceilinged rooms and some unusually large windows. These features are attractive but do not help with energy efficiency. The owners are committed to reducing their carbon footprint within the constraints of the Grade 2 listing of their home. They've previously taken advice on permissible forms of insulation from Energy Efficient Widcombe, now Go Green Widcombe, and in 2011 they applied, jointly with previous owners of the adjoining house, 2 Cambridge Place, for solar panels. This application was turned down, but Mr Bourne appealed and permission for a hot water panel was granted in 2012. This has allowed the family to switch off their gas boiler during most of the summer months, as the panel has provided sufficient hot water for their needs. The panel cannot be seen from the road, but it is visible from across the valley on Lincoln Hill and from Lincoln Hill Fields. More recently, Mr Bourne applied for listing building consent for secondary glazing for the principal windows. This was granted and has significantly reduced heat loss from the property. The current application seeks to retain the existing hot water panel with PV panels located either side on the middle roof elevation, and also to place PV panels on the front roof elevation, which is hidden behind the stone parapet. Baines Council declared a climate emergency in 2019 and has spent the past 4 years embedding progress across a number of fronts. The Council's climate emergency strategy identifies domestic buildings as being responsible for nearly 40% of emissions, and houses such as this will contribute disproportionately to that figure. I would add that if we are to meet the Council's targets in relation to renewable energy, domestic solar energy will be vital. It is essential, therefore, that sensitive retrofitting is allowed. The Historic England guidance advocates that planning authorities need to balance the harm of a PV scheme against the sustainability benefits of a proposal. The 3 images of the property, I'm afraid you can't see those because we weren't allowed to produce them, but the officers' photographs are very similar, show that any solar panels would not be visible from across the road or to anyone walking up the hill. There is limited visibility of the roof from the corner of Clarendon Road to people walking down on the other side of the hill. Any new panels would also be visible from Lincoln Hill and Lincoln Hill Fields, as the current one is. It's also worth noting that the TV aerials and satellite dishes on the roof of the property are also visible from the corner of Clarendon Road and from across the valley. The Historic England guidance also states, where a building has a shallow pitched roof which is largely hidden from view by parapets or internal roof slopes, which cannot be seen from ground level, solar electric panels may be accommodated more easily. This accurately describes the situation at 1 Cambridge Place, and I would urge the committee to consider that the very limited impact on the appearance of the property is of far less significance than the carbon reduction that will be achieved by the sustainable generation of electricity by the solar panels. In line with the declared climate emergency, I urge you to permit the siting of solar panels on both of the south-facing pitches of the roof, with the condition that the development is subject to a supportive structural engineering report.
Thank you very much. Right, now invite members to ask questions to the case officer. So who would like to start? Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. Just one question, really. So the view you showed us looking down, is it Whitcomb Hill? Is that the only view of that roof from anywhere in Bath? Is that the only point of view where you'd actually see the panels from?
From this street, yeah. I think there are a view across the valley, but that would be very limited. This is the most prominent view of the roof.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Halsall.
Thank you, Chair. Is there any specifications been submitted in terms of the thickness of the solar panels?
So we do have a product spec which was submitted, which shows the product that would be purchased in order to carry out this installation. But we don't have that in comparison to the roof. We don't have a sectional drawing to show how they would be secured and how the thickness would be in relation to the roof. The plans which I showed you are the plans that we have, and we don't have anything more.
Sorry. Thank you. Can I just ask a question there? Ask my colleagues here for advice. In the address that we just heard, it spoke about there would be a report from an engineer about the technical aspects, but obviously we don't have it in front of us today. So what's the significance of that?
The application before you is accompanied by a recommendation, and it's based upon the information that you have. The officer has already been in negotiations with the applicant and sought various information previously, including various reports, but this is the position that's been reached and the information that has been provided. So if members were to make a decision today, they need to make it based on the information that is available to them, and in terms of other information that could come forward, I would just point out that there are a number of reasons for refusal, and if it does not help to overcome the reasons for refusal, then you could potentially be asking for information that would just put the applicant to more expense that may not be provided anyway, and it may not actually make any difference to your decision. So if that answers your question, what you're making is a decision based upon what you have.
Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor Simon.
Thank you. I mean, is it possible to make a condition on a listed building application that a certain piece of information be supplied to the satisfaction of the authority, and would that deal with the structural engineering issue? That's my first question. My second is, what discussions did the planning officer have with the applicant about the use of the rear slope rather than the front slope? That is the third slope, if you like to call it that, as the site for the additional panels.
So to answer your first question in relation to the condition, it is possible to put conditions on listed building consent applications so long as they meet the 6 tests in the NPPF. In this instance, it is considered that the structural survey would be needed prior to determination, because we would need to be confident, if we were permitting an application, that that would be able to be achieved and installed without harm to the structural integrity of the property. An offer was made throughout in the application for that information to be forthcoming, and that has not been the case. So it's officer's consideration that a condition would not be relevant in this case. So comments from the conservation officer were provided to the applicant and we were asking for some justification for the solar panels to be on the primary roof principal elevation. And the retrofitting SPD does say that the principal elevation should be avoided if there are other options available. We haven't had any information about exploring those other options, so we haven't been able to take them into consideration as they have not been proposed.
Thank you. I have a question. In your report, you state the provision of the solar panels are afforded moderate weight. I've been reflecting on a different application that we considered in recent times. It was for a solar panel array at Burnett. We turned down the application, but it was approved on appeal. And in the appeal report, there's a paragraph here which I'd just like to read to you. It says, "It's not clear why the council did not find that very special circumstances existed on the basis that the energy generated would mostly meet the energy requirements of the dwelling. The substantial improvement to the way that energy is provided to the large dwelling significantly lessens its demand on fossil fuels and reduces its carbon output, which is a benefit that should be given considerable weight, particularly in light of the strong national policy support for the development of renewable energy sources and the council's own declared climate emergency." So, in other words, the inspector in that case stated that he or she considered the public benefit to be significant, considerable, worth considerable weight. So would you like to just give us an explanation why you would give this moderate weight and not considerable weight?
Thank you, Chair. So that appeal decision is for a much larger solar array. This application is for solar panels on a private property, and the NPPF calls to consider public benefit. Whilst it is acknowledged that the solar panels would primarily be for the private benefit of the occupiers, it is acknowledged that there is a climate emergency declared by the council, and in any case, any solar provision, even if minor, would lead to a public benefit in the response to the climate emergency. And that is why we are saying there is a public benefit, and it's moderate, because it is not a large array which would have a large amount of public benefit.
Okay, thank you. More questions? Councillor McPhee.
Would it be right to say that if you had had information about the colour and the technical aspects of the cells, you would have been able to give a positive decision to this?
That's difficult to say because I don't know what information that would be, and I would have to seek advice from our conservation officers. In any case, the SBD, as I mentioned, does point towards having solar panels not on a principal elevation, if that is possible. So my concern would be that we could have that information, it could be considered, but I'm not sure that it would overcome the issue.
Councillor McPhee again.
Yeah, one more is the councillor read out quite an interesting thing from, I believe, conservation, and it gave that guidance. I'm sure you're familiar with what I'm talking about, but that seemed to be giving the okay to put these things in view on listed buildings. Would you like to comment on that recommendation?
The provision of solar panels in principle is supported. That has to be weighed against any harm that may be caused to the listed building in question. It may not be appropriate in every case. In other cases, it may be on a principal elevation and it may be acceptable, but that has to be assessed on a case-by-case basis. In this instance, we have solar panels proposed on the inner valley, which the council which officers do not have an issue with. But the proposal on the principal elevation in this location, considering its visibility, and in addition to the lack of structural information, we can't offer our support at this stage.
My colleague Sarah James wants to come in here.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to add to what the case officer just said is it's very difficult, now impossible, to consider what might happen or what someone might have thought or intended by comments. What we have here is an application which has a very clear set of information which has been assessed by the case officer, and the decision needs to be made upon based upon what you have before you today. Thank you.
Councillor Simon.
Just going back to the structural engineering question, you haven't specified that as a reason for refusal. So how does it fit to the wording of your reasons for refusal?
So us not having the structural survey does not give us the confidence that no harm would be caused. So the reason for refusal encapsulates the lesser substantial harm that would be caused, and for the various reasons that I stated, that goes into that reason. There isn't a reason for refusal based on lack of information, but it does. The reason for refusal does encapsulate that we don't have the information to be confident that no harm would be caused.
Thank you. Councillor Hodge.
I just wanted to ask, Daniel, if I could see the roof plan again, because it's not opening on the documents on the file. And the detail we've got is those 4 positioned panels on that edge. Really, is the detail, isn't it? Is the third back of the roof? That's another section of the roof. The third which would not be visible. There's a south-facing aspect on that final section. Is that the same house, or is that a different house where it says back?
That's the same house.
So there are a number of other options for. I mean, there's some west-facing slopes as well. I suppose were those all explored with the? I think that's west, isn't it? Yeah, so there's 2 west-facing slopes and a valley, another south-facing valley.
There were discussions and comments from the Conservation Officer were sent to the applicant to consider, but no further proposals to change the position of the solar panels were presented to us.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? All right, we'll go to the debate. Who would like to start off with their thinking? Councillor Halsall.
Thank you, Chair. So we have the listed building, and we're having a climate emergency. There is some conflict, I think, here, because obviously we've got a significant heritage stock in this city, but we've also got a significant climate problem. Just because it's a listed building shouldn't mean that we shouldn't be considering retrofitting these buildings. Certainly in terms of solar panels, technology is going to evolve over the next few years. The building is going to outlive any solar panels that will go on that building. So we have to consider the harm, and it is less than substantial harm. The jargon is substantial or less than substantial, so it's the latter in this case. So when we say, yes, there is going to be harm, are there any public benefits that outweigh that? And it's been confirmed by yourself that there would be public benefit as well as specifically private benefit, but obviously it is going to contribute towards, reducing carbon. Can't see a precedent being set because every application is different. Every listed building has its own attributes. So I think really what it's boiling down to is possibly lack of information in order to be certain that the scheme or that the less than substantial harm would be accepted. On that basis, I'd like to put forward a motion maybe to support to actually grant planning that listed building consent for this, but with the condition that we do get a structural report, and also a condition that we do actually get the specification of the panels, particularly in terms of their finish and their thickness. So then the only other issue then is the fact it's on the south elevation. It's generally considered that we shouldn't really have them on a visible frontage. So obviously the panels on the rear in the valley are quite acceptable, and we've all agreed there. You can't see the panels outside the house, down Widcombe Hill. The only way you can see them slightly is on that junction of Clarendon Road. And also, given that the panels are about, a metre below the ridge, I think the fact that they're lower down below the chimney and obviously the parapet's in the way, the fact you will see them, I think is negligible. And I think actually that I would be happy to support granting a listed building consent because I think the public benefit and the climate emergency issue prevails.
Okay, Sarah James.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to clarify a couple of things prior to taking some of those comments forward. Certainly, when members consider adding any conditions, it's important to know the purpose of those conditions. So certainly with regards to if you were to recommend or decide to permit this application subject to conditions, you could certainly add conditions relating to what the detail of those solar panels would look like. But if you were to add a condition asking for a structural report of the roof, you would have to understand and decide what the purpose of that condition would be, because if you've already permitted it, irrespective of what that structural report says, how would that affect? It couldn't then result in it being unimplementable because you'd be adding a condition that doesn't meet the conditions tests. So I think you have to consider that before adding any conditions on. I think just the other point I would make is the weight to be given to the public benefits is a matter for and the harms is a matter for the decision makers. So it is up to yourselves to decide how much weight should be given to those elements. But decisions made should clearly be considered and rational. And there's certainly nothing within the planning legislation approach within Baines that restricts, as a blanket approach, retrofitting of listed buildings. Certainly there are listed buildings that are retrofitted with solar panels and all sorts of other things, but in terms of this particular case, you have to consider if that's appropriate and the weight to be given to the various elements. Thank you.
Can I just follow from that, just to make it clear that we have to use the policies that we have. We're not a policy-making body. And I just want to clarify with Councillor Halsall, because are you putting forward the motion to support the application and perhaps not include this idea of conditions? So are you proposing a motion to support the application?
Yes, Chair, I'd like to support the application and grant listed building consent.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Yes, a seconder from Councillor Crossley. Thank you.
Can I speak now?
Indeed.
Thank you very much. When the environment that we live in changes, we always have these problems. And we might have been sitting around a few years ago and discussing whether telephone points should be put in, whether television points should be put in, whether television areas should be allowed, whether central heating should be allowed, whether we can put electricity into old buildings. So life moves on and life changes. And what we've got now is the fact that modern houses are built to much better energy efficiency than they were in the past. Now, that gives a problem to all our old buildings and the fact that they are not built energy efficiency. And we have a household here where they've taken all the measures they can in terms of double glazing on a listed building. And I see absolutely no problem at all with adding solar panels. Solar panels are increasingly appearing on houses across the authority area. They do not damage the environment. They do not damage the context of those housings in the area. And in fact, actually, as they go up, more and more people say, actually, I think I should be following your lead. So I think what we've got here is a good application, and I reach a different conclusion from the officer, and the fact that I think the primacy on this application should be the way we address the climate emergency, which we as a council have listed. I actually don't agree that putting panels on a roof harms the fabric of the listed building, so I disagree with that interpretation. And therefore, I'm more than happy to second permit of these solar panels on this building.
Thank you. Right, carry on the debate. Councillor Hodge.
Yes, I'm very supportive of the climate emergency arguments and enabling solar panels and thinking about our listed building housing stock. But what I'm concerned about is the application that has come before us and the quality of the detail that has been provided with this application. I feel this is a really important application that's come before us, and we do have a policy, and the policy says that we should avoid prominent and highly visible roof slopes of primary elevations, and it should be explored that solar panels, actually that's not the policy, the second bit, but that's our policy at the moment. I'm concerned if we permit this application, we've got a very big housing stock, lots of listed buildings. Where does that place us with future applications coming forward, especially if we accept an application with such little detail as those rectangular squares? We don't really know the details of what is going to be put on that roof, and I would argue that this particular property is in a prominent location in Widdicombe as you come down the hill. It's quite a prominent view of that roof space where there are alternatives. So, yeah, I would prefer the application to come back with more detail. Is my view before overturning the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Can I just clarify? We got a motion on that's been tabled and seconded, and we will at some point vote on that. Should that fail, is a motion to defer in this instance to acquire further information, is that something that the committee could consider?
Thank you, Chair. Just before the motion gets taken to a vote, I would just ask the proposers to clarify the reasons, because when officers' recommendations are overturned in order to permit something, we need to ask reasons. I suggest, just listening between the lines, in this case it might be something along the lines of whilst there's less than substantial harm, in this case you feel that the public benefits outweigh that harm. That may be the reasons that the proposers would like to give, but that's over to you really to just clarify that, because we must have reasons from you. Then taking it forward to the next question that was raised by the Chair, if this motion were to fail and a motion was put forward to defer the application in order to get additional information and details, specifically I think Councillor Hodge was referring to the details possibly of the solar panels themselves, maybe the elevations and some sort of details of those. Prior to making a decision, if members felt that that was a motion that they wished to put forward, that would be an acceptable motion to propose in this case. I can't tell you if the officer has already sought that information from the applicant. I know that the officer has certainly sought information with regard to the structural capability of the roof, and if the applicant were to get permission, they would have to satisfy themselves on that point in any event. But that is something that could happen. Does that answer your question, Councillor Hodge? Thank you.
Yes, and a further question which you may be able to answer. With the last application, there was an issue of precedence, or concern about precedence. That's been raised again here. If this application was approved, is there an issue of setting a precedent that might have to be applied to other properties, or would this decision stand alone?
Thank you, Chair. Precedent, as we've already discussed, is capable of being a material consideration. Every time a new form of development takes place, that then becomes the new context, and it is something that would be taken into account. So anything within the very close vicinity would take into account the presence of those solar panels, and we would look at that when considering other applications. Particularly, though, it's worth noting, and it's important to note, that each case is considered on its merits. There may not be a directly comparable site or dwelling or proposal. Even an adjoining property could be completely different and have completely different circumstances, maybe a different roof form. And also, it may or may not be a listed building. So there may be very specific factors why that precedent should carry some weight, but that could be very, very minimal weight. But you can't rule out precedent in any particular case. Thank you.
Right, so more debate. So, Councillor McPhee.
I support Councillor Hodge. I'm not confident that I know what is going to be put up, and in that case, I can't, although I would like to pass this, I can't, and I would certainly support what you were just talking about, some kind of deferment and get the information.
Okay, just to be clear, I wasn't recommending it. I was just asking if it was would be acceptable.
I was looking at the officer rather than you.
Right, thank you. Right, Councillor Halsall.
Yeah, just to follow up on my motion, the reason that I would give to permit this is, whilst there is less than substantial harm to the listed building, the public benefits, I think, carry with weight. So that's why I would like to support it. Following on from Councillor Hodge and Councillor... sorry, how is it? What's your surname? McPhee, thank you. I can get to know all the councillors' names. If my motion isn't carried, then I would be happy to support a deferral for more information. Or if I also can just ask if my motion is carried, I would like to ask for a condition for the specification of the solar panels to be submitted before allowing the development to go ahead.
Right, I'm a little bit concerned about the last thing you said, because I thought it was explained earlier that would be an unreasonable condition because, well, for the explanation that was given before. Do you want to clarify?
Sorry, I'll come back and clarify that one. I may not have been clear first time round. It would be possible to add a condition on this to require details of the solar panels. It's clear that there are solar panels and we don't have much detail. We don't know what that detail would be, of course, but we would have an opportunity to request it. What would be more difficult is to ask for a condition that requires a structural report of the roofscape, because if the consequences of that structural report was to come back and say, you can't, it's not strong enough, you've already permitted it or consented to the development. So that is the condition that I was referring to when I was suggesting I don't think that's a reasonable approach, but certainly you can ask for details of the solar panels themselves.
Councillor Warren. So, apologies, have I missed you for a while? How could I do that? Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. I mean, personally, I don't have any problem with the principle of putting solar panels on this house, and I don't really have too many concerns about the visual aspect of it. But I think this reluctance to provide technical data or structural engineers' data concerns me. The data supplied is very sketchy, just a few hand-drawn sketches, and I mean, certain responsibilities come with the privilege of living in a listed building, and you need to be able to undertake those the requests of the officers. So I don't think it's unreasonable for the officer to have asked for more data on this. So I'm quite happy to either support the officer or to support a deferral to allow the applicant to provide that information. But I won't be supporting the motion at the moment.
Councillor Simon.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure that Councillor Halsall's motion was seconded. Yes, it was. All right, so yes, Councillor Crossley did. In any case, I'd like to support the deferral option.
Councillor Warren.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a deferral option on the table to support at the moment, is there? Again, I've got no issue. In one hand, you have the policy which says you can't put the solar panels on listed houses. On the other hand, you've got a climate emergency. During the last application, there was a question asked, was there enough solar panels going on it? I recently did some building. Part of the planning was I had to have, I think it was 9 solar panels. So what do we do? I agree with Councillor Crossley. It might be the first time in 16 years perhaps, but I do agree with Councillor Crossley in this, the fact that we've got a climate emergency, we have to take notice of it. It's a difficult one about the roof. However, if you live in the house and the roof's not strong enough to put those panels on, are you going to put the panels on? So I think probably that goes to, so I guess my issues cover with that, thinking that people aren't going to do something if it's not possible. So I'm absolutely happy to support the recommendation with this one. The proposal, the motion rather than
the motion. Councillor Malloy.
Thank you. No, I was going to say, in principle, I would also support putting solar panels also on listed buildings, but I think in this case, I have to agree with the Bath Preservation Trust comment that further design details are needed, and if you're saying that the structural reports also needed to prove that the roof itself is strong, then that is pretty essential information that needs to be submitted before. So I would support, I know we're not onto that yet, but I would support a deferral of the decision, and I won't be supporting overturning the officer's advice.
Right, I think we'll go to a vote now on the motion that's on the table, which is to overturn the officer's recommendation and to permit this planning application. So it's proposed by Councillor Halsall and seconded by Councillor Crossley. So all those in favour of that motion, please show. All those against, please show.
6.
Any abstentions? Right, so that motion has failed. We have another motion from proposed by Councillor Hodge for a deferral to acquire further information. I need a seconder for that. Councillor Simon. I'm not sure that we need further debate. Does anybody want to speak on that? Right, we'll go to a vote. All those in favour... Oh, just one second.
Can I just clarify, before you make that decision, that you are seeking a deferral for a period of time for it to come back to the next committee? Because my understanding is that the case officer has already sought some of this information that is now, that the application may be deferred to achieve. So in the event that the officer hasn't received that within a certain period of time, as it's already been requested and hasn't been provided before, are members suggesting that it would come back to the next committee for a decision? Just to clarify that, really, so we're clear. I don't know if the case officer wants to clarify if what's been sought already.
So we have sought the extra details. We have asked for the structural survey and further details in regards to the installation, how they would be installed on the roof slope. That's not been forthcoming at this stage. If we were to defer, I believe that the application would need to come back to committee because the applicant is a relation of a councillor.
It would need to come back to committee, but it's just really to put a timescale on that. It would come back next month if we haven't achieved any further information. If that's your deferral, that's really just to clarify. That is what members would be seeking.
Councillor Crossley.
I think if we're asking for a deferral based on structural grounds, we can't guarantee that that would be done within a month. So I think we need to take the timescale off it, but accept that the reapplication will come back to this committee at some time in the future.
Thank you. I take that point on board, Councillor Crossley. From a planning perspective, we have a duty to make decisions at the earliest possible timescale. So I think it's really just to be clear that if the deferral happens and we undertake further negotiations with the applicants, that in the event that it is not confirmed to us that they are seeking a structural report and some indication of when that would be provided, that we would be in a position to bring it back to the next committee for a decision. Because what we don't want to do is obviously take an application away and defer it, and then it just be left in a void, because we may not be provided with that information at all, even though we seek it. Thank you.
Right, can we defer for 1 month and that we revisit this in 1 month with whatever additional information has been provided at that time, and then we'll make a decision? Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Could I just add that the officer mentioned the structural details and how it would be installed, and it is also the design details of the proposed panels, their appearance and finish. I am aware, I think that you did say you received that from the applicants, the product, but we haven't, I think, as a committee, seen that. So it's those design details as well, appearance and finish, and how they'd be fixed, just so that everything is tied up. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Simon.
Can I just tie down the question of timing? The next meeting is in fact in 3 weeks' time. That's too short. So we're talking about the meeting at the end of July. And what I suggest is that if the officers have had a timetable for provision of information from the applicant, that they should put the matter off until that timetable has expired. But if they haven't had a timetable for provision of information, they can bring it to the July meeting.
Yeah, that sounds very acceptable. Anybody else wish to speak? Right, we'll go to a vote now, and the motion put forward by... sorry, I didn't make a note. Councillor Hodge, and seconded by Councillor Simon, to defer for the information that's been requested. Okay, all those in favour, please show. Yeah, any against? No. Any abstentions? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you to the case officer. It's been a long morning. Thank you. We move on now to the appeals report. Does anybody have any questions or comments on the appeals report? We're asked to note the report.
Sorry, actually, I don't have it up on my screen, but I did have a question for the officers, as for Sarah possibly, that the appeal that was successful for the two versions of the student housing on the Lower Bristol Road is reported there. So does that mean they can build either of them? How has that come to pass? There's two versions of the same application. Sorry. Yes, sorry, I can't. I need to open that document up.
2104,147 and 2201,299.
Yeah, two different descriptions, so two different applications that they went to, and yeah, so...
They can choose which one they deliver then?
Each application is independent of the other, so if they appeal both applications and both are allowed by the inspector, then they would be in a position to implement either.
Okay, lovely, thank you.
Just a quick question. Have any costs been awarded against the council, or equally have any costs been awarded in favour of the council since the last report?
I'm not aware of any costs in either direction. We would normally bring that information to the committee with the appeals report, but we'll make sure that we do obviously do that as well.
Councillor Simon.
I did actually, I read the appeal decisions on those on Froome House, and costs were awarded against the council. It was a planning committee decision, and the feeling was the planning committee had overstepped the mark, as it were. But so I think we do need to reflect on that.
Thank you, Councillor Simon. I don't have that cost information before us, so that's a useful, obviously, information to raise. I haven't got that detail, but I can certainly bring information back regarding that costs decision to the next committee with some comments from the officers, if that is helpful.
Thank you very much. Anybody else with a comment or a question about the report? Right, we do need to note the report, so if we can just do that with a show of hands, we've noted the report. Thank you, that's unanimous. The date of next meeting, our next meeting takes place on Wednesday the 28th of June. If there are any site visits, I don't think we have any. That would have taken place on Monday the 19th of June, but we don't have any, certainly at this moment. So the next meeting, Wednesday the 28th of June, and I formally close the meeting and thank you all for your contributions.